That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun rose sharp over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the parade ground where the 82nd Airborne Division's K9 unit assembled at 0500 hours. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention, her boots planted firm on the dew-slicked grass, the weight of her utility uniform pulling taut against her shoulders. At her side, Rex, her German shepherd partner, sat rigid, his black and tan coat gleaming under the first light. Ears perked toward the distant hum of Black Hawk rotors warming up on the helipad. The air carried the faint scent of pine from the surrounding Carolina woods, mingled with the sharp tang of gun oil from the armory. "Unit, report!" barked Captain Harlan Reed, the handler team's commanding officer. His voice cut through the morning chill like a rifle crack, echoing off the low barracks buildings. Reed was a career officer, broad-shouldered and precise, his fatigues starched to perfection. He paced the line of handlers and their dogs, 12 teams in total, each a seamless extension of military precision. Elena's heart rate stayed steady. She'd run this drill 100 times. Loyalty wasn't just a word in the K9 Corps. It was the pulse that synced handler and K9, a bond forged in silence and repetition. Elena had joined the unit 5 years earlier after transferring from combat medic training. At 32, she was one of the few women in the handler ranks, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun beneath her patrol cap. Rex had been her match from day one, a rescue dog with a nose that could detect explosives from 50 yards out. They moved as one. Her hand signals crisp, his responses immediate, no words needed. In the field, that trust had saved lives, sniffing out IEDs in simulated urban ops, alerting to hidden threats before the team stepped blind. Here on base, it was routine, scent detection, obedience drills, the endless cycle of readiness. "Handler Vasquez, advance with Rex," Reed ordered, his eyes scanning the formation. Elena stepped forward, Rex heeling perfectly at her left knee. The other handlers watched from their positions, Sergeant Mills with his Belgian Malinois, Corporal Tate with her Labrador. The dogs' breaths puffed in the cool air, a quiet rhythm underscoring the commands. Elena knelt, clipping the training harness to Rex's collar, her gloved fingers brushing the worn leather. "Seek," she murmured. The word barely audible, but Rex's head snapped up, nostrils flaring. The drill site was a mock village setup, plywood structures mimicking Afghan compounds, scattered with concealed odor canisters, simulated C4, black powder, the works. Elena released Rex and he bounded forward, tail low and focused, weaving through the obstacles with mechanical grace. The unit held its breath. A false alert could mean recertification, a blemish on the team's record. Rex paused at the third hut, pawing the ground, then sat alert. Elena approached, marking the hit with a quiet, "Good boy," her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. She'd earned her stripes this way, quiet competence, no fanfare, but as the teams rotated, something shifted. Private First Class Landon Greer, a new transfer to logistics support, lingered at the edge of the field. He was young, barely 20, with the cocky slouch of a fresh enlistee who thought the uniform made him invincible. Greer had been assigned to assist with equipment setup that week, hauling cones and dummies, but his eyes often wandered, appraising the handlers with a smirk that bordered on disdain. Elena had noticed it before. Whispers in the mess hall about the women who play with dogs instead of pulling triggers. She ignored it. The chain of command didn't tolerate distractions. "Greer, secure the perimeter markers," Reed snapped as the next team moved up. Greer sauntered over, dragging his feet, but instead of tightening the orange stakes, he kicked one loose near Rex's path. It was subtle, a nudge disguised as clumsiness, but Elena saw the glint in his eye. Rex, mid-drill on the next rotation, startled at the shifting obstacle, barking once sharply before redirecting. The alert was clean, but the disruption rippled. Sergeant Mills's dog hesitated, chaining a minor fault into the log. "Report the anomaly," Reed demanded, his clipboard already out. Elena's jaw tightened under her cap. She could call it out, accuse Greer of sabotage, demand an incident review. But Greer was under Reed's direct oversight, a logistics kid with connections back in admin. Speaking up meant painting a target on her back, questioning a superior's judgment in front of the unit. Duty said document and move on. The manual was clear on chain of command. Yet conscience tugged. Rex's trust in her was absolute, and this felt like a test of something deeper, a quiet erosion of the respect that held the unit together. As the formation broke for debrief, Eleanor unclipped Rex's harness, running a hand along his flank. His fur was warm, damp from effort, and he leaned into her touch, eyes steady. The other handlers dispersed to the kennels, boots thudding on the path, radio chatter crackling about afternoon PT. Greer brushed past her, muttering under his breath, "Dogs don't win wars, Sergeant." The words hung like smoke, unseen by Reed, but heard by Corporal Tate nearby. Elena straightened, saluting Reed as he passed. "All clear, sir." The lie tasted bitter, but obedience was the foundation. Still, as she led Rex back to the kennel block, the scent of wet earth and kibble filling the air, she felt the weight of the unspoken. Bases like Bragg ran on order, but cracks formed in silence. That afternoon, during the unit's mandatory cool-down walk, a child's laughter drifted from the family housing edge. A boy on the sidewalk, chalk in hand, scribbling names in bright blue. Elena didn't think much of it then. Just another slice of base life amid the drills, but the defiance had planted its seed, waiting for the moment to break ground. The afternoon sun climbed higher over Fort Bragg, turning the kennel block into a shaded sanctuary of routine. Elena Vasquez guided Rex through the chain-link gate, the metal clinking softly behind them. The air inside hung heavy with the earthy musk of damp fur and fresh straw, punctuated by the low whines and tail thumps of the other dogs settling into their runs. She filled Rex's water bowl from the spigot, the cool stream splashing against stainless steel, and watched as he lapped steadily, his flanks rising and falling in post-drill rhythm. 5 years of partnership had etched their bond into muscle memory, no grand gestures, just the quiet reliability of shared purpose. "Easy, boy," she said, her voice a low murmur as she checked his paws for thorns or abrasions. Rex's eyes met hers briefly, dark and knowing, before he turned back to the water. In the K9 unit, handlers like Elena lived by the manual, daily health logs, conditioning runs, scent wheel rotations. It was the backbone of readiness, a discipline that mirrored the Army's core, predictable, unyielding, essential. She'd risen through the ranks on that foundation, from basic handler school at Lackland to specialized ops certification here in North Carolina. Women in the unit were still outliers, but Elena had proven her place through results, not words. Rex's detection rate was 98%. Complaints weren't in her file. Across the compound, the logistics shed buzzed with activity. Private Greer hauled crates of training aids onto a flatbed, his movements deliberate but unhurried, sweat beading on his forehead under the Carolina humidity. Captain Reed oversaw from the doorway, clipboard in hand, issuing clipped directives over the static hum of a field radio. "Secure those manifests, Greer. We rotate inventory at 1600. Reed's tone brooked no slack. He'd commanded the K9 teams for a decade, his career a ladder of commendations from deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. Under his watch, the unit had certified for joint exercises with Delta Force, a point of pride etched in the briefing room plaques. Elena finished Rex's check and latched his run, the gate's bolts sliding home with a familiar click. She wiped her hands on her trousers and headed toward the admin trailer for her shift report. The path wound past the motor pool, where Humvees idled in neat rows, engines ticking as they cooled. A few handlers nodded as she passed. Sergeant Mills with a quick, solid run this morning, his Malinois trotting at heel. Elena returned the acknowledgement, her posture straight, cap shadowing her eyes. Small talk was minimal. The unit thrived on focus, not camaraderie. Inside the trailer, the air conditioner droned steadily, circulating the scent of coffee and printer ink. Specialist Rao, the unit's intel clerk, glanced up from her terminal. Vasquez, log your hits. Reed wants the full packet by end of day. Elena slid into the chair opposite, pulling up the digital form on the shared screen. She entered the details methodically. Time, sense deployed, Rex's alerts. The anomaly from Greer's kick lingered in her mind, the loose marker that had thrown Rex off for a split second. It wasn't a major fault, but in certification audits, it could flag as environmental interference. Documenting it meant escalating to Reed, potentially pulling Greer into a formal inquiry. Logistics support fell under a different chain, but cross-unit incidents required notation. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Duty demanded accuracy. The K9 manual was explicit on integrity and reporting. Yet Greer's mutter echoed, "Dogs don't win wars," a dismissal that stung deeper than ignorance. She'd heard the undercurrents before, sidelong glances in the chow line, jokes about pet handlers diluting combat roles. As a woman and a medic transfer, Elena navigated it with silence, letting performance speak. Calling out Greer could be seen as overreach, a challenge to Reed's authority in managing his support staff. The chain of command was sacred. Breaching it lightly invited scrutiny, perhaps a transfer or worse, a quiet mark against her for personality conflicts. Outside, a truck rumbled past, kicking up gravel that pattered against the trailer's siding. Elena typed the basics, omitting the sabotage. "All clear," she logged. The words feeling like a concession. She printed the sheet and signed it, the pen scratching paper in the quiet room. Rao filed it without question, turning back to her screens. As Elena stepped out, the heat pressed in again, the sun glinting off the distant parade ground where afternoon PT echoed, cadence calls, boots pounding in unison. The walk back to the kennels took her past the family housing perimeter, a fenced buffer where military life blurred into civilian normalcy. Children played in the yards, their shouts a counterpoint to the base's disciplined hum. One boy, no older than 8, knelt on the sidewalk near the gate, chalk clutched in small hands. He scribbled boldly. Names, perhaps, or drawings. Blue lines vivid against the concrete. Elena paused briefly, Rex's lead loose in her grip, as she retrieved him for their evening conditioning. The boy looked up, smudges on his cheeks, and waved shyly before returning to his work. That evening, as the unit gathered for the 1800 briefing in the ops tent, the air thick with the aroma of MRE coffee and canvas, Reed reviewed the day's logs. "Clean sweeps overall," he announced, his voice steady over the folding tables. The handlers sat in rows, dogs at rest beside them, ears twitching at the fan's whir. Eleanor's entry passed without comment, but Corporal Tate caught her eye from across the aisle, a subtle nod, as if she'd noticed the hesitation in the drill too. Greer stood at the rear, arms crossed, his logistics patch crisp on his sleeve. "Tomorrow, we integrate with the 80 seconds live fire sim," Reed continued, pinning a map to the board. "K9 leads on perimeter sweeps. No anomalies tolerated." The words landed like an order, and Elena felt the pull again, obedience versus the nagging sense of erosion. As the briefing dismissed, handlers filed out into the twilight. The sky bruising purple over the pines. Rex pressed against her leg, sensing the tension in her stride. She scratched his ear absently, the fur soft under her fingers, a reminder of unyielding trust. In the dimming light, Eleanor glanced back toward the housing edge. The boy's chalk scrawls caught the last rays, names in looping letters, one standing out faintly. Vasquez. She blinked, assuming it coincidence, a child's idle game. But the seed of defiance stirred deeper now, the unspoken crack widening. Routine held the base together, but conscience whispered of costs yet unpaid. As she led Rex into the night for their run, the crunch of gravel underfoot marked each step, the horizon alive with the low thrum of readiness. The first hints of dawn filtered through the ops tent's canvas flaps, casting muted stripes across the folding tables where the K9 unit gathered at 4:30. Sergeant Elena Vasquez arrived early, Rex at her heel, his paws silent on the dew-dampened ground. The air held the crisp bite of Carolina autumn, laced with the faint diesel from idling generators beyond the perimeter. She secured Rex to the tie-out post, his chain-link leash clinking softly, and reviewed the integration brief pinned to the board. Joint exercise with the 82nd Infantry Platoon, K9 sweeps ahead of simulated live fire. Precision was non-negotiable. A missed threat could cascade into full unit failure. Captain Reed entered with his usual measured stride, fatigues pressed, his boots leaving faint imprints in the grass. "Handlers, stand to!" he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of expectation. The team assembled, 11 pairs now, with one dog sidelined for veterinary rotation, their postures aligning like rifle barrels. Elena took her place third in line, her utility belt adjusted just so. The radio clipped to her shoulder, humming faintly, with base-wide chatter. Reed outlined the op, advanced through the mock urban grid at low 600, dogs leading on scent for buried simulants, infantry providing cover. "Flawless execution," he emphasized, eyes sweeping the group. "This certs us for deployment rotation." Private Greer hovered at the tent's edge, tasked again with logistic support, hauling the scent crates and perimeter flags to the exercise site. His uniform was regulation, but his stance slouched, a subtle defiance in the set of his jaw. Elena had logged the prior day's anomaly as environmental, but the omission gnawed at her during the night watch. Rex had sensed it too, whining softly in his run until she sat with him under the stars, her hand steady on his collar. Loyalty in the unit wasn't abstract. It was the handler's log, the dog's alert, the chain that bound them to mission success. As the team loaded into the transport Humvees, the engines growled to life, vibrating through the metal benches. Elena sat mid-row, Rex's head resting on her knee, his breath warm and even. The convoy rolled out under sodium lights, tires crunching over gravel toward the training range. A sprawling expanse of sandbagged barriers and chain-link enclosures mimicking forward operating bases. Greer rode in the lead vehicle, responsible for staking the start line. When they arrived, the sun crested the tree line, gilding the plywood facades in pale gold. Handlers deployed methodically, unclipping leads, donning vests, sinking watches. "Perimeter set," Greer radioed from the forward post, his voice crackling over the net. But as Elena advanced with Rex for the initial sweep, she spotted the irregularity. A flagpole angled inward, its guy wire slack, positioned to snag a dog's path through the narrow alley sim. It mirrored yesterday's disruption, too precise for accident. Rex paused at the threshold, nostrils flaring, his body tensing against the invisible barrier. Elena signaled halt, her gloved hand firm on his lead. "Easy," she whispered, scanning the setup. The infantry platoon waited 50 yards back, rifles at low ready, their platoon sergeant eyeing the delay. "Vasquez, report," Reed's voice cut in via radio, static underscoring the tension. "Obstruction on approach, sir." Flag wire compromised. She kept her tone neutral, eyes flicking to Greer, who stood adjusting crates nearby, his face impassive. The unit held position, dogs shifting restlessly, the morning breeze carrying the sharp scent of simulated powder from the hidden canisters. Correcting it meant halting the full exercise. invoking a safety stand-down, protocol for any anomaly that could simulate real hazards, but attributing it to Greer required witnesses, evidence beyond her word. Corporal Tate, running parallel with her Labrador, caught the wire's slant and nodded subtly, but said nothing. Reed arrived on foot, his stride purposeful, clipboard tucked under arm. "Assess and bypass if clear," he ordered. Inspecting the wire himself, his fingers tested the tension, brow furrowing briefly. Greer approached at a jog, feigning concern. "Must have loosened in transit, sir. I staked it solid." Reed glanced at him, then at Elena. "Document post-op, Vasquez. Proceed." The sweep resumed, Rex navigating the detour with focused intensity, alerting cleanly to 3 buried scents amid the rubble piles. The infantry advanced in bounding overwatch, their boots thudding in controlled rhythm, suppressed fire pops echoing from the ranged towers. Eleanor's focus sharpened, but the incident lodged like grit in a mechanism. Midway through, as teams rotated for the compound clear, Greer lingered near the resupply point, handing out water bottles with a smirk directed her way. "Careful with the obstacles. Sergeant, wouldn't want the pup tripping." The words were low, but Sergeant Mills overheard, his Malinois growling softly at the tone. The unit pressed on, completing the sim under Reed's watchful eye, but the air thickened with unspoken friction. Debrief convened at 900 in the range hut, the scent of gunpowder residue clinging to everyone's gear. Handlers sat on benches, dogs at rest, while Reed reviewed footage from the helmet cams. "Solid integration," he noted, but paused on the wire snag. "Vasquez, your log?" She stood, posture erect. "Flagged as potential interference, sir. Wire slack. Possible equipment fault." Omitting Greer's role again felt like erosion, but escalation without proof risked fracturing the chain. Reed nodded, jotting a note. "Forward to maintenance. Greer, double-check setups tomorrow." The private saluted sharply, but his eyes met Elena's with a challenge, the room's fluorescent hum amplifying the silence. As the team dispersed for kennel rotations, Elena led Rex toward the housing perimeter for his cool-down walk, the sun now high and unrelenting. The chalk markings from the previous evening had faded under foot traffic, but the boy was there again, crouched on the sidewalk with a fresh stick of white. He glanced up as she approached, Rex sniffing curiously at the low fence. "Is that your dog?" the child asked, voice bright against the base's subdued pulse. Elena knelt to Rex's level, allowing the interaction under protocol. Controlled exposure built resilience. "Partner," she corrected gently. The boy grinned. Turning back to his drawing, amid stick figures and houses, he scrawled letters in careful strokes. Vasquez, bold and uneven, flanked by a crude dog silhouette. "Saw your name on the roster board? You're the one with the hero dog." She froze, the word hero hanging unfamiliar in the disciplined air. The roster was public in the ops tent, but this, a child's tribute, pierced the routine. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady despite the stir. "'Cause you keep everyone safe," he replied simply, chalk dust on his fingers. Rex sat alert beside her, tail thumping once. As she rose to continue the walk, the marking lingered in her periphery, a quiet defiance against the morning's shadows. Back at the kennels, as she logged the exercise, now including a vague note on the wire, Elena felt the dilemma crystallize. Obedience preserved order, but ignoring the pattern invited deeper sabotage. The unit's integrity, like Rex's bond, demanded more. That afternoon, whispers circulated among the handlers, Tate pulling her aside near the water troughs. "Saw Greer. We back you if you report." Eleanor nodded, the weight settling. The chain of command offered paths, formal grievance, anonymous tipline, but each carried risk. As evening fell, the base lights flickered on, casting pools of yellow over the paths. Rex leaned into her during their final check, his presence a steady anchor. The boy's chalk, washed away by a passing sprinkler, left only the memory, but it etched something enduring. A reminder that names and acts endured beyond the logs. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The fluorescent lights of the ops tent buzzed steadily at 2,000 hours, casting a sterile glow over the metal folding chairs where the K9 unit's extended briefing unfolded. Sergeant Elena Vasquez sat midway down the row. Rex settled at her feet, his head resting on his paws amid the faint scent of oiled leather and cooling boot polish. The day's joint exercise lingered in the air like residual humidity. Handlers' fatigue still carried the grit of the range, and the low murmur of post-op chatter filled the pauses between Captain Reed's words. Maps of the training grid lay spread across the central table, marked with red pins for alerts and yellow for the wire anomaly. "Full review," Reed announced, his voice even as he clicked through helmet cam footage on the projector. The screen flickered with the morning's advance. Rex's form cutting through the alley sim, his alert posture crisp against the plywood barriers. Elena watched her own gloved hand signal the halt, the slack wire glinting in the sunlight. Reed paused the frame, his finger tapping the table. "Vasquez, walk us through the obstruction." She rose smoothly, posture aligned, her boots scuffing faintly on the canvas floor. "Approach the threshold at 0612, sir." Rex indicated hesitation. "Environmental factor confirmed as guy wire failure. Bypassed per your order. No impact on detection rate." The words flowed precise, drawn from her log, but she avoided Greer's direction at the room's rear, where he leaned against a support pole, arms folded over his logistics vest. Corporal Tate shifted beside her, Labrador's ears perking at the shift in tension, a subtle reminder of the whispers from the water troughs. Reed nodded, advancing the footage to the resupply point. Greer's form appeared briefly, handing out bottles, his back to the cam. "Greer, your setup log." The private straightened, stepping forward with measured steps. "All stakes driven per spec, sir. Transit vibrations must have worked it loose. I'll recalibrate the kit." His tone was regulation neutral, but Eleanor caught the flicker in his eyes, a challenge masked as compliance. The unit listened in silence, the projector's hum underscoring the exchange. Sergeant Mills cleared his throat once, his Malinois shifting restlessly. "Maintenance will inspect," Reed concluded, shutting down the feed. "No repeats. This cert hangs on seamless ops." He dismissed the core team, but pulled Elena and Greer aside as the handlers filed out, dogs leading with tails low. The tent emptied gradually, the flap rustling in the evening breeze that carried the distant whir of a perimeter patrol. Rex stayed at heel, his warmth a grounding pressure against her calf. Reed's expression remained impassive, clipboard balanced on one arm. "Vasquez, your notes flag interference twice now. Pattern?" Elena met his gaze steadily, the weight of the afternoon's decision pressing in, the handler's quiet backing, the risk of fracturing logistic support for the unit. "Possible, sir. Consistent with equipment handling." She kept it vague, protocol guiding her to facts over accusation. Greer interjected smoothly, "Respectfully, sir, I've run setups clean for weeks. If it's the gear, point it to supply chain." Reed's eyes narrowed fractionally, scanning between them. "Both of you, joint inventory check at 0700. Vasquez, observe. Document everything." The order landed like a directive, neutral but probing, the chain of command flexing without breaking. As they saluted and dispersed into the night, the base's sodium lamps painted long shadows across the paths, the air cooling to a crisp edge. Elena led Rex toward the kennel block, gravel crunching underfoot, the faint echo of boots from off-duty patrols marking the rhythm of fort life. Greer's footsteps faded behind, but his presence lingered like static on the radio. She scratched Rex's ear absently, his fur coarse under her fingers, a silent exchange of reassurance. The bond held no judgments, only response to threat. Unclouded by rank or resentment, the next morning broke with a fine mist over Fort Bragg, veiling the parade ground in a soft haze that muffled the 0500 reveille. Eleanor arrived at the logistics shed early, thermos of black coffee in hand, its steam curling against the damp chill. Rex waited tethered outside, his breath visible in puffs, nostrils testing the air for the metallic tang of crates and fuel. Greer was already there, stacking scent canisters with deliberate motions, his sleeves rolled to the elbows. "Morning, Sergeant," he said, voice clipped as he hefted a box onto the workbench. No smirk this time, just the routine of task. They worked in tandem under Reed's distant oversight from the ops tent, cataloguing wires, stakes, and harness clips. Elena's hands moved methodically, gloved fingers tracing tensions and alignments, her logbook open beside her. "This batch shows wear on the guy lines," she noted aloud, holding up a frayed sample. Greer paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool air. "Rotated in last month from supply. If it's failing, not on me." The exchange stayed professional, but the undercurrent hummed. Each item checked a potential flashpoint, the inventory a microcosm of trust eroded. Midway through, a radio crackle broke the rhythm. "All handlers to family housing perimeter. Non-emergency assist." Elena glanced at Greer, who shrugged. "Your call." She clipped the log shut and retrieved Rex, the mist beading on his coat as they jogged the path. The housing edge came into view, a cluster of MPs cordoning a section of sidewalk near the low fence. The boy from before stood with his mother, chalk scattered at his feet, his small face streaked with confusion. An MP sergeant nodded Elena over. "Kid's drawing got attention. Base command wants it cleared. Routine, but he's insistent it's for you." The mother explained softly, her voice laced with apology. "He saw you walking the dog yesterday, said you're important." The boy clutched a dampened stick of blue chalk, pointing to the concrete where Vasquez arched in looping letters, now blurred by the mist, but defiant. Surrounding it, crude sketches of a dog and soldier, labeled hero in wobbly caps. A few off-duty personnel lingered, murmuring, handlers from the unit. A logistics tech snapping a photo on his phone before an MP waved him off. Elena knelt, Rex sitting alert beside her, his nose inches from the drawing. "You did this for me?" she asked the boy, her tone even, masking the stir in her chest. "Yeah," he replied, eyes wide. "Dad says you find the bad stuff before it hurts people, like a guardian." The words echoed Greer's dismissal, flipping it into something tangible, a child's unfiltered truth amid the base's ordered facade. The MP cleared his throat. "Command's en route for photos. Public Affairs wants morale angle. Keep it contained." Elena nodded, standing as Reed arrived, his vehicle pulling up with a gravel crunch. He surveyed the scene, brow arching at the chalk. "Vasquez? Resident tribute, sir. No issue." But as the boy beamed, the gathering eyes, handlers whispering, Greer's distant figure watching from the shed, shifted the air. The drawing, meant for play, had breached the perimeter, drawing witnesses to her name in a way logs never could. Reed ordered a quick snap for the bulletin board, dismissing the crowd, but the ripple spread, a handler texting the unit group, the photo circulating quietly. Back at the shed, the inventory resumed, but Greer's movements sharpened, his jaw set. "Cute PR," he muttered under his breath as Elena logged the final checks. She met his gaze directly. "It's not about PR, Private. It's about the job." The words hung brief, professional, but the test deepened. Her silence on his actions now weighed against this unexpected spotlight. Reed's radio buzzed with an update. "Anomaly review escalated to battalion. Full audit." The captain glanced their way, the chain stirring. As the morning mist lifted, Elena led Rex on cooldown, the sidewalk drawing fading under a hose spray, but its imprint lingered in the wet sheen. Whispers followed her through the paths, respect laced with curiosity, and for the first time, the erosion felt countered, conscience gaining ground in the quiet discipline of the day. Rex's steady gait mirrored her resolve, the bond a testament to integrity unbroken. The bass hummed on, but the defiance, once solitary, now echoed faintly in the ranks. The battalion commander's office overlooked the central quadrangle of Fort Bragg, its windows framing the steady march of a passing formation under the midday sun. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention before the polished oak desk, her boots aligned precisely on the worn carpet runner, Rex waiting outside in the corridor with a handler aide. The air inside carried the faint must of old files and the sharper bite of fresh ink from the printer humming in the corner. Colonel Harlan Graves, a silver-haired veteran with deployments etched into his furrowed brow, reviewed the audit packet with deliberate turns of the pages. Logs from the drills, helmet footage timestamps, the flagged anomalies on the guy wires and markers. "Vasquez," Graves said, his voice gravel-rough from years of field commands, eyes lifting to meet hers without preamble. "Captain Reed's report cites equipment inconsistencies. Your observations?" He leaned back in his creaking chair, the fabric of his uniform whispering against the leather. Elena kept her posture rigid, hands clasped behind her back, the weight of her patrol cap steady on her head. She'd been summoned at 1100 sharp, pulled from a routine scent rotation with the unit. The chain of command had activated the formal process. An internal review board, triggered by the pattern in her logs, now elevated beyond Reed's oversight. 3 instances of disruptions during setups, sir, she replied evenly, her words measured as per protocol. Loose markers on the 5th, slack wire on the 7th, and a misaligned stake during yesterday's inventory prep, all tied to logistics handling. She didn't name Greer outright. Protocol reserved accusations for sworn statements, but the implication hung clear in the room's quiet. Graves nodded once, flipping to the attached maintenance report. Frayed lines from improper storage, stakes with uneven torque. No malice proven, but negligence flagged red. The door opened with a soft click, admitting Captain Reed and Private Greer, the latter's face schooled to neutrality under his cap. Reed saluted crisply, taking position to Elena's left, while Greer stood at parade rest to the right, his logistics insignia glinting under the fluorescent lights. Graves gestured them forward. "This isn't a tribunal yet, but the K9 certification hangs on integrity. Reed, your support chain?" "Under review, sir," Reed answered, his tone clipped. "Greer's setups have been spotless prior. If it's systemic, supply chain bears it." Greer shifted fractionally, boots scuffing the carpet but held silent as ordered. Eleanor's gaze remained forward, but she felt the room's tension coil tighter, like a spring in a rifle bolt. The audit wasn't just about wires, it probed the unit's cohesion, the invisible threads of trust that kept dogs and handlers synced in the field. Graves steepled his fingers, the gold of his rings catching the light. "Vasquez, you've omitted attributions in your initial logs. Why?" The question landed direct, no accusation, but Elena felt the probe deep, duty to report fully versus the risk of inter-unit friction. She drew a measured breath, the air conditioner droning softly in the background. "Chain of command protocol, sir. Documented facts first, escalation on evidence. Handlers corroborated the patterns informally. Tate and Mills had slipped her notes during the morning PT, quiet affirmations without fanfare. The colonel turned to Greer. "Private, your account." Greer straightened, voice steady. "Sir, I followed procedure. If gear's failing, it's not from my end. I've logged every stake and wire." His eyes flicked to Elena briefly, a shadow of resentment passing, but he recovered with military poise. Graves jotted a note, the pen scratching paper like Morse code. Full statement from all parties by 1600. Read, reassign logistics support pending clearance. Vasquez, continue ops. Your team's lead on tomorrow's certification run. Dismissed, they filed out into the corridor, the door sealing behind with a thud. Rex rose as Elena approached, his tail giving a single wag, nose bumping her hand in silent greeting. Reed pulled her aside near the water fountain, its trickle a low counterpoint to the passing footsteps. "Solid in there," he said quietly, his expression unreadable. "But if this escalates, it ripples. You sure?" Elena met his gaze, the bond of command tempered by the morning's resolve. "Yes, sir. The unit's readiness depends on it." Greer lingered at the far end, adjusting his gear bag, but said nothing. His departure marked by the echo of boot heels on tile. The afternoon shifted to the training fields, where the K-9 teams assembled under a sky streaked with high clouds, the wind whispering through the pine stands. Elena clipped Rex's harness, the leather warm from storage, and led the initial sweep across the open range, simulated perimeter patrol. Dogs questing for buried threats amid the trampled grass. The other handlers fanned out in pairs, radios crackling with position calls. Team Alpha clear, Beta holding. Without Greer's setups, the markers stood firm, stakes driven deep, wires taut. Rex moved fluidly, alerting to a concealed canister with a precise sit, his breath puffing in the cooling air. Midway through, a Humvee approached from the housing perimeter, its tires kicking up dust that settled like fine powder on Elena's sleeves. Public Affairs Specialist Lena Torres disembarked, tablet in hand, her civilian blouse tucked into khakis, a bridge between ops and morale. Sergeant Vasquez, quick follow-up on the chalk incident. The boy's drawing had gone viral in base channels overnight. A handler shared photo, captioned with quiet pride, now picked up by the Post newsletter. Families had seen it, children asking about the hero dog lady, spouses murmuring in the PX line. Elena signaled Rex to heel, wiping sweat from her brow with her forearm. "Ma'am?" Torres smiled faintly, scrolling her screen. "The command's leaning into it for unit morale. Kid's dad is in the 82nd, says his son won't stop talking about you. Want to record a short statement? Keeps the positive spin." The request was routine, but Elena hesitated, the audit's shadow lingering. Public eyes amplified everything. A feel-good clip could bolster her position or paint her as seeking attention. "Keep it mission-focused," she said finally, voice level. "The dogs do the work. We just guide." Torres nodded, hitting record on her phone as Elena spoke briefly. "Partnerships like this save lives. Every alert counts." Rex sat alert beside her, ears perked toward the device, his presence underscoring the words without show. The clip wrapped in under a minute, but as Torres drove off, a cluster of handlers approached from the sidelines. Mills and Tate, with a few infantry observers from the joint unit. "Saw the post," Mills said, his Malinois sniffing the air. "Good for the team. Greer's reassigned to motor pool. Heard it on the net." The news spread like radio static, quiet but pervasive. Elena logged the sweep's completion in her notebook, the pen's ink drying under the sun, but the weight lifted fractionally, the audit's probe yielding first results. Back at the kennels as dusk fell, the air thick with the scent of cooling earth and kibble bowls, she groomed Rex methodically, brushing his coat until it gleamed, checking pads for splits. His eyes held hers steady, a mirror to the day's unspoken trials. The chalk tribute, once a fleeting mark, had etched into the base's rhythm, drawing lines of support where silence had reigned. That evening, during the unit's cool-down assembly in the ops tent, Reed announced the reassignment formally, his voice carrying over the folding tables. "Logistics audit ongoing. Focus on your lanes." Whispers hushed, but eyes turned to Elena with a new measure of respect. the moral tension easing into procedural justice. As she led Rex out into the starlit paths, the gravel firm underfoot, a distant child's laughter echoed from the housing edge. Another drawing, perhaps, names in chalk against the night. The defiance, born of routine cracks, was mending now, one disciplined step at a time. The chain held, tested but unbroken, loyalty's quiet pulse beating stronger in the dark. The certification run dawned under a veil of low clouds over Fort Bragg, the air heavy with the promise of rain that held off just long enough for the K-9 teams to deploy. Sergeant Elena Vasquez adjusted her vest straps at 05:30, the nylon whispering against her fatigues as she clipped Rex's lead. The training range sprawled before them, a grid of sandbagged lanes and mock barriers etched into the Carolina soil, the faint scent of wet pine mingling with the acrid residue of yesterday's powder burns. Handlers moved in synchronized pairs, radios clipped and humming with pre-op checks. Alpha ready, Beta sinking. Captain Reed stood at the command post, his silhouette sharp against the portable screen displaying the op layout. Perimeter sweeps leading to a compound clear, dogs questing for multi-scent simulants under simulated fire support. Logistics support had shifted to a vetted team from the 82nd's quartermaster, their stakes driven deep and wires tensioned without flaw. No anomalies today. The audit shadow had cleared the path, though Greer's reassignment to motor pool duty lingered in the unit's quiet exchanges. Elena felt the shift in the air. The handler's nods carried a subtle solidarity, forged in the unspoken backing from Tate and Mills. "Teams, advance!" Reed ordered over the net, his voice steady through the static. Elena released Rex with a crisp hand signal, his paws padding softly on the dew-slicked grass as he ranged ahead, nostrils flaring to the wind. The exercise unfolded with mechanical precision. Rex alerted to a buried canister at the first marker, sitting alert with a low whine that Elena marked instantly, her voice calm over the radio. "Hit confirmed, Sector 1. The infantry shadows held position 50 yards back, their suppressed rounds popping in controlled bursts from the safety towers, simulating overwatch without chaos. Halfway through the second lane, the rhythm broke. A Humvee from Battalion Command rolled up to the observation ridge, its tires grinding gravel, disgorging Colonel Graves and a pair of suits, public affairs, and an Inspector General rep, clipboards in hand. They weren't scheduled. The audit had escalated quietly overnight, pulling in external eyes for the certification's high stakes. Elena caught the movement from her peripheral as Rex paused at a junction, his ears pinning back not at a scent, but at the vehicle's rumble. "Hold position," she murmured, scanning the wire setups, flawless, but the observer's arrival amplified every step. Graves approached the post with Reed, their boots thudding in unison on the packed earth. "Vasquez leading?" the colonel asked, voice carrying over the wind. Reed nodded, gesturing to the screen where helmet cam feed showed Rex's fluid weave through the barriers. 98% detection projected, sir. Clean so far." The IG rep, a wiry major with a notebook, jotted notes, his pen scratching audible even at distance. Elena pressed on, but the weight of scrutiny pressed heavier. Protocol demanded focus, yet the public layer exposed the unit's undercurrents. As teams rotated for the compound phase, the revelation cracked open. Specialist Torres from Public Affairs, who'd filmed the morale clip, arrived with a tablet streaming base channels. The boy's chalk drawing had snowballed. The photo, shared innocently, had hit the Army's internal social feeds, drawing comments from deployed units, reminds us why we train, and even a nod from JAG oversight on integrity themes. But it pulled Greer's name into the light. A logistics tech, off-duty and loose-lipped in the comments, had tied it to the audit whispers, "Kid honors the handler while support screws the setups." The post went viral within the fort's network, screenshots circulating to handlers' phones mid-exercise. Tate's radio buzzed first. Vasquez, you seeing this? Elena glanced at her device during a brief halt, Rex healing patiently, his flank warm against her leg. The thread unfolded, praise for the K9 bond, questions on the anomalies, Greer's handle tagged in speculation. No direct accusation, but witnesses piled on, Mills logging a prior setup fault, an MP noting Greer's proximity to the disruptions. The moral provocation, once siloed in logs, spilled public, the institution's response swift as a stand-down call. "Exercise pause. All teams to debrief," Reed announced over the net, his tone edged with command steel. The handlers converged on the central hut, dogs panting softly in the rising humidity, the scent of damp fur cutting through the gun oil. Graves waited inside, flanked by the IG Major and Torres, the room's folding table strewn with printouts. Audit summaries, the viral thread, even a transcript of the boy's interview from housing security. Greer was summoned from motor pool, arriving under escort, his face pale under the cap, posture rigid but eyes darting. "Vasquez front and center," Graves directed, his gravel voice filling the space. Elena stepped forward, saluting, Rex at heel outside the door with an aide. The colonel slid a folder across, sworn statements from the handlers, maintenance forensics on the frayed wires, traces of improper coiling, consistent with rushed handling. Private Greer's logs don't match the wear patterns. This board finds negligence, bordering on intent to disrupt. Greer's shoulders sagged fractionally, the room's air thick with the hum of the dehumidifier. "Sir, he began, but Graves cut him off. "Statement later. For now, restricted duty pending formal inquiry." The reckoning unfolded methodically. Reed detailing the certification's jeopardy, the IG outlining Article 92 violations, failure to obey order and conduct prejudicial to good order. Witnesses spoke in turn, Tate confirming the smirks, Mills the overheard mutter, each testimony short, respectful, mission-focused. Eleanor's turn came last. "The disruptions risked the team's readiness, sir. Documented to protect the chain, not undermine it." Her words hung steady, conscience vindicated in the fluorescent glare, the viral thread projecting on the wall like evidence in a tribunal. Torres captured it discreetly for morale records, but the media ripple extended. A base newsletter tease on K9 integrity under fire, anonymized but pointed. Graves adjourned with orders. Greer to admin hold, full investigation by week's end. Certification rescheduled, clean. As the group dispersed, handlers clustered outside, Rex leaning into Elena's touch, his presence a quiet anchor amid the dispersing boots. Reed pulled her aside near the Humvee. "Your call sparked this. Unit owes you." No praise, just fact, the moral choice rippling upward, reforming the support chain with stricter cross-checks. By afternoon, the clouds broke. Sunlight slanting through the pines as Elena led Rex on a solo perimeter walk, the grass springing underfoot. The housing edge came into view, the sidewalk scrubbed but etched in memory. The boy waved from his yard, chalk in hand again, this time drawing a simple salute beside a dog. Families nodded as she passed, the base's pulse shifting, whispers of reform, mentorship slots opening for new handlers on ethics protocols. Greer's intent, exposed, yielded consequence, a quiet tribunal looming, his career marked. In the ops tent that evening, as logs updated under the canvas glow, Elena filed her final report, the pen's scratch a testament to endurance. The defiance, born of a single kick and a child's scrawl, had transformed, loyalty reinforced, the institution leaning toward justice without fracture. Rex's steady gaze met hers, the bond unbroken, a symbol of conscience prevailing in the ranks' disciplined silence. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The inquiry wrapped under the steady hum of the battalion conference room's air unit. its vents circulating the faint scent of polished wood and stale briefing coffee from the sideboard. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at ease in the back row, her arms loose at her sides, the fabric of her fatigues still carrying the morning's range dust. Rex waited outside with a junior handler, his low whines filtering through the door like a distant radio check. Colonel Graves presided at the head table, flanked by the Inspector General Major and Captain Reed, their faces etched with the procedural gravity of a closed session. Private Greer sat forward, uniform crisp but posture rigid, his hands flat on the table as the sworn statements cycled through the overhead projector, logs, timestamps, handler testimonies rendered in black and white print. Article 92 established, Graves stated, his voice cutting clean through the room's quiet. Negligence in duty, with intent inferred from pattern. Greer, your disruptions compromised unit certification, endangered operational readiness. The private's jaw tightened, but he nodded once, eyes fixed on the table's grain. No outburst. The chain of command extracted accountability without theatre. Elena watched from her vantage, the weight of her initial silence now a pivot point, the logs she'd flagged, the handler's corroborations, the viral thread that had forced visibility. Greer's motive, probed in deposition, traced to resentment, a sidelined enlistee chafing at support roles, targeting the K9 unit as a symbol of what he saw as softened edges. No malice against her personally, but the erosion was systemic, a quiet sabotage born of unchecked frustration. Reed spoke next, his tone measured over the flip of pages. Recommendation. Administrative reduction to specialist. Reassignment to stateside logistics training. Mandatory ethics module, 6 weeks, supervised. Graves concurred with a curt nod, the gavel's tap echoing like a boot on concrete. Effective immediately. Dismissed. Greer rose, saluting sharply, before exiting under escort, his footsteps fading down the corridor with mechanical precision. The room exhaled collectively, the IG Major gathering files into a locked briefcase, its latches clicking home. Elena lingered as the group thinned, Reed approaching with a subtle gesture toward the window overlooking the quadrangle, where a formation drilled under the afternoon sun, rifles snapping in unison. "You held the line," Reed said quietly, his gaze on the marching ranks. "Audits yielding protocols. Cross-unit verifications mandatory now, starting next cycle. Your logs set the template." Elena nodded, her cap shadowing the faint relief in her eyes. No medal, no fanfare. Reform came in memos and checklists, the institution adapting without fracture. The K9 command had already circulated a directive. Handler input on support setups, anonymous reporting streamlined through the tip line. Whispers in the mess hall framed it as Vasquez Protocol, a quiet nod to her role, not as hero but as the handler who documented the cracks before they widened. By 1600, the unit reconvened at the kennel block for post-inquiry rotations, the air thick with the earthy tang of straw and water troughs refilling under the spigot's rush. Handlers moved with renewed focus, Tate brushing her Labrador's coat in long strokes, Mills logging a fresh scent wheel under the overhang. Elena clipped Rex's lead, leading him through the perimeter path, the gravel firm underfoot as the sun dipped toward the pines. Families clustered at the housing fence, a few children waving chalk-stained hands. The boys' drawing had inspired a ripple, sidewalks now dotted with tributes to base guardians, names scrawled in pastel loops amid stick-figure patrols. His mother had approached Elena earlier, voice soft over the fence. "He won't stop. Says you're why his dad's safe overseas." The words landed like a salute, unearned but anchoring. The certification rescheduled for dawn the next day unfolded without shadow, the range clear under a sky washed pale by overnight rain. Eleanor advanced with Rex at 0600, his paws sinking slightly into the softened earth, nostrils questing through the mist that clung to the barriers. Alerts came crisp. 3 hits in the first sector, marked with her steady "confirmed" over the radio. The infantry provided cover in bounding pairs, their suppressed pops a controlled underscore, no hesitations from faulty wires or loose stakes. Reed monitored from the post, his radio affirmation steady, clean progression. Handlers rotated seamlessly, the units bond, human to canine, peer to peer, humming like a well-tuned engine. Mid-exercise, Specialist Torres arrived with the public affairs team, not for drama but documentation. A short reel on K9 readiness, Elena's clip from days prior edited in, her voice overlaying footage of Rex's alerts. Partnerships like this save lives, it repeated, now framed with the unit's full sweep. Handlers' faces blurred for ops security. The reel would hit base channels, a morale booster laced with the inquiry's lesson. Integrity as mission enabler. As teams wrapped at Aero 900, Graves observed from the ridge, his nod to Reed carrying approval. Cert passed, forward for deployment packet. The colonel's glance toward Elena held measure. Her actions had rippled upward, sparking a mentorship pilot. Senior handlers training logistics on field impacts, ethics woven into quarterly briefs. Afternoon brought the ops tent for debrief, canvas flaps stirring in the breeze that carried the distant thrum of helipads spinning up. Reed pinned the cert badge to the board, its brass glinting under the fluorescence. "Unit stands ready," he announced, eyes sweeping the rows where dogs rested, tails thumping softly. Elena sat with Tate and Mills, Rex's head on her boot, the group's quiet exchanges turning to the reforms. "No more blind setups," Mills noted, his Malinois shifting. Vasquez's call made it stick. She waved it off, voice level. Just the job. But the shift was tangible. The chain of command, tested, had bent toward equity. Her conscience a catalyst without spotlight. As evening settled, Elena led Rex on their final walk, the paths lit by sodium glow, the air cooling to carry the pine's resin. The housing perimeter hummed with family life, laughter from yards, a sprinkler hissing against concrete. The boy waited at the fence again, chalk in hand, this time drawing not just her name, but a line of figures. Handlers, dogs, a barrier unbroken. "For the team," he said simply as she passed, his small salute mirrored by Rex's perked ears. She returned it with a nod, the gesture lingering in the dusk. Back at the kennels, she latched Rex's run, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light, a bond forged in silence, enduring beyond ranks or inquiries. The base pulsed on, drills echoing faintly, but Elena's name, once a line in a roster, now symbolized quiet reform, a handler's stand rippling through protocols, reminding the institution that loyalty demanded vigilance, not just obedience. In the rank's disciplined rhythm, conscience had carved its legacy, one chalk mark at a time. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of She Thought the World Forgot Her Name, until a child wrote it on the sidewalk in chalk. See you in the next one. In the end, a single name on concrete proved that honor, once etched, outlasts the rain.